The more this island gives up, the deeper the mystery gets. That sounds like a contradiction until you have spent enough time with what Oak Island actually is, and then it becomes the most accurate description of how this search works. Every answer produces 3 questions. Every layer of the excavation that is peeled back reveals a layer beneath it that is more complex than the one above. Every discovery that confirms a piece of the theory simultaneously expands the theory in directions that the previous version of it was not large enough to contain. Season 13, Episode 21 is the latest and the most powerful example of exactly that pattern. The team has made a major discovery, physical, documented, and sitting in the analytical record with the kind of solidity that serious archaeology demands. And the discovery does not simplify the Templar mystery, it deepens it. It adds a dimension to the story of who came to this island and what they brought and what they were doing here that transforms the search in a way that nobody involved was fully prepared for. The mystery is deeper now than it was before the discovery. And deeper, on Oak Island, means closer to something true. This channel has been covering this story for a long time, and every time we think we have seen the most significant moment, the island produces another one. If you are watching for the first time, drop a subscribe and tell us where in the world you are joining from tonight, because this community has been built on exactly the kind of moment you just walked into. Tonight the story takes a turn that the existing framework of this search accommodated without fully anticipating. A discovery from episode 21 that fits the Templar theory, not by confirming what was already expected, but by revealing an aspect of what the Templars were doing on this island that previous evidence had not made visible. The mystery deepens because the discovery is not additive, it is transformative. It does not add another piece to the puzzle, it reveals that the puzzle is shaped differently than anyone thought. What the team found in episode 21 is going to take some careful unpacking, and the unpacking is worth doing properly. The Templar theory of Oak Island has always rested on 3 pillars: the engineering of the money pit, which matches the Templar construction tradition, the physical artifacts recovered from the site, which match the Templar period and origin, and the historical pathway, which traces a plausible route from the suppression of 1307 to the coast of Nova Scotia. Those 3 pillars have been reinforced across multiple seasons of work to the point where the theory has moved from speculation to the most evidentially supported explanation for what this island contains and who built it. What episode 21 adds is a 4th pillar, one that the existing 3 did not predict and that changes the structural character of the argument from a case built around concealment to a case built around something considerably more complex and considerably more interesting. The discovery made by the team in this episode is not another artifact from the construction layer. It is not another alignment, or another engineering feature, or another piece of physical evidence that fits the existing categories of the Templar case. It is an inscription, carved into stone, at a depth and in a location that places it beyond any reasonable doubt in the original construction context of the island, using a symbolic language that the team's analysts have now spent considerable time decoding, and that connects directly to the Templar tradition in a way that is specific enough and complex enough to rule out coincidence and rule out imitation. The people who left that inscription were not hiding, they were communicating, and communicating in stone, at depth, on an island at the edge of the known world is the act of people who intended their message to be found by someone who would know how to read it. Inscriptions are not uncommon in Templar archaeology, and understanding the tradition that produced them is essential to understanding what the Oak Island inscription means, and why its discovery deepens the mystery rather than resolving it. The Templars developed a sophisticated tradition of symbolic communication over their nearly 2 centuries of operation, rooted in the blend of Christian, Islamic, and Kabbalistic knowledge they encountered during their time in Jerusalem, and refined through generations of internal transmission. This tradition served multiple purposes simultaneously. It allowed communication between initiates that was opaque to outsiders. It embedded information about the location and nature of significant sites in forms that would survive even if the people who created them did not. And it created a record of institutional knowledge that was independent of any single document or repository, distributed across physical locations in a form that required both the knowledge of the symbolic system and the physical access to the inscribed sites to read. The inscriptions that Templar archaeologists have documented across sites in Europe and the Holy Land are not simple marks or casual graffiti. They are composed, deliberate communications that encode information at multiple levels of meaning, surface readings accessible to initiates at one level of the tradition, and deeper readings accessible only to those with more complete knowledge of the symbolic system. A single inscription can simultaneously be a location marker, a statement of institutional identity, a reference to specific documents or objects, and a communication about the nature of what is concealed at or near the inscribed site. The Oak Island inscription belongs to this tradition. The team's analysts identified it as such not on the basis of a general resemblance to Templar symbolism, but on the basis of specific elements of the symbolic language that are characteristic of Templar inscriptional practice, and that are documented in the comparative record well enough to support precise identification. What it says, in the symbolic language it uses, is the dimension of the discovery that is still being worked through, and that makes the mystery deeper rather than simpler. The deepening comes from what the inscription implies about the nature of the Oak Island operation, rather than from any ambiguity about its origin. Because the symbolic content of the inscription, read through the framework of Templar inscriptional tradition, does not point simply to a deposit, it points to a repository. A distinction that sounds minor and turns out to be enormous, because a deposit is something placed and left. A cache of objects sealed against retrieval by the wrong people at the wrong time. A repository is something maintained, a collection that was intended to be added to, referred to, and managed by successive custodians across an extended period of time. The Templars built repositories. They were, among their many other functions, one of the great institutional archives of the medieval world, accumulating documents and objects and knowledge over 2 centuries of operation at the intersection of every major intellectual and religious tradition of the period. When their order was suppressed and their archives threatened, the question of what they did with what they had built is one of the central unanswered questions of medieval history, a question that scholars have pursued across generations without reaching a consensus. The inscription on Oak Island suggests an answer to that question that is larger than the treasure narrative has ever quite accommodated. Not a cache of gold and artifacts from a single operation, but a repository, built to receive and protect and potentially to expand the accumulated knowledge and material of an institution that intended to survive its own official dissolution, and that chose this island as the location where that survival would be anchored. That is the dimension of the mystery that episode 21 has opened. Not whether the Templars were here, the evidence for that has been building for seasons and is now beyond reasonable dispute. But what they were building here, and what the full scope of it looks like, and what it means that they chose to encode that information in an inscription, rather than simply leaving it in the physical structure of the site. The team's response to the inscription discovery reflects the weight of what they are dealing with in a way that is worth paying attention to. The excitement that previous finds produced, the energy of confirmation, and the satisfaction of watching evidence accumulate toward a conclusion that the search always pointed toward, is present, but it is accompanied by something more serious this time. Something that sits alongside the excitement rather than being replaced by it. The recognition that the inscription is not the end of a chain of evidence but the beginning of a new and more complex one, that what it implies about the nature and the scale of the Oak Island repository raises questions that the current excavation is going to have to be substantially expanded to address. Rick Lagina, who has carried the emotional continuity of this search across its most difficult seasons, responded to the inscription with a particular quality of attention that he brings to moments that he understands are genuinely pivotal. Not celebration, and not overwhelm, but the focused, serious engagement of someone who has been waiting a long time for the search to reach this level of complexity, and who recognizes it when it arrives. The mystery is deeper now. That is what the inscription confirms. And deeper means that what this island contains is not smaller than anyone thought. It is larger. The practical implications for the ongoing excavation are significant, and the team is already working through them. An inscription that points to a repository rather than a simple deposit changes the excavation priorities in specific ways. The locations that the symbolic content of the inscription identifies as significant within the site plan are not necessarily the same locations that the depositional framework pointed toward, and the Season 13 work is already being reoriented to investigate the positions that the inscription's content suggests are most important. The island is still demanding. The water is still managed by pumps that run constantly, and the depth of the primary construction is still a challenge that the best available equipment addresses without fully resolving. The engineering built into this site was designed to protect a repository that its builders intended to survive indefinitely, and it is performing that function with the reliability that 7 centuries of uninterrupted operation has confirmed. But the team now has something that changes the terms of the effort in a fundamental way. They have a communication from the people who built this place, left in the stone of the island itself, pointing toward what they built, and what they put inside it, and what they intended for the people who would eventually be capable of finding and reading what they left behind. The Templar mystery is deeper after episode 21 than it was before it. The discovery that deepened it is one of the most significant finds in the history of this search. And the answers that the deeper mystery is pointing toward are the answers that 230 years of searching on this island have always been building toward. What comes next you do not want to miss.